Hello, everyone. I am a former forensic officer. Today, I would like to share an old story of mine, with some embellishments to present a mysterious experience. I worked as a police officer for many years, and during that time, I encountered numerous strange and terrifying experiences. I would like to share some of those experiences with you on this channel. Today's story is about the wet chair incident experienced by John, a spiritually sensitive police officer. John was a colleague I met during my time as a police officer, and he too has experienced many bizarre incidents. Even after his retirement, John continues to share his wealth of experiences with us. While telling this story, I have referred to my old diary and added some details to make it more coherent. I have taken care to ensure that no specific individuals can be identified, while providing a realistic and detailed episode. Additionally, I want to express my deep gratitude to my two grandchildren, who have greatly assisted in the production of this video. They listened to my old stories, turned them into scripts, and created these videos. Thanks to their efforts, I am able to share this story with you all. Now, let's step into the world of mysterious and somewhat frightening experiences. Please enjoy, and to everyone watching this video, I would appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to my channel. Furthermore, I would love to hear about any strange experiences you have had, or any advice you have for my grandchildren, who are middle school students using handy editing software to create these videos. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Let's begin. John's experience took place on a quiet night inside the police station. John, who had a spiritual sensitivity, was always aware of any unusual changes in his surroundings. That night, as he was patrolling the station, he felt a strange sense of unease. He couldn't pinpoint exactly what was causing it, but something felt different from usual. As John walked down the corridor of the station, he noticed that the door to one of the rooms was slightly ajar. The door, which was usually kept closed, was now open, prompting him to think that something unusual might be happening in that room. He quietly opened the door and peeked inside. The room was empty, but he noticed that the chair in the middle of the room was wet. John couldn't understand why the chair was wet and entered the room cautiously. There were no traces of water around the chair, and there were no signs of water dripping from the ceiling. It was as if the chair itself had suddenly become wet. When John approached the chair and touched its surface, it was indeed wet. As he pulled his hand back, he realized that the water was unnaturally cold. Feeling uneasy about the wet chair, John decided to leave the room temporarily. However, his curiosity got the better of him, and he returned to the room after a while. When he opened the door again to check inside, the chair was now dry, as if the earlier incident had been an illusion. Even though he continued his night patrol, John couldn't stop thinking about the wet chair. He returned to the room again, opened the door, and found the chair wet once more. This time, he was certain that the chair was indeed wet. So he decided to inform his colleagues at the police station about it. John shared the story of the wet chair with his colleagues, but none of them took him seriously. Some said it was probably just spilled cleaning water, while others laughed it off as his imagination. However, John was convinced that the chair was not wet by mere accident or mistake. He decided to return to the room and conduct a thorough investigation. John prepared to take photographs the next time he found the chair wet. He also carefully examined every corner of the room, checking the ceiling and floor for any signs of water, but found nothing unusual. The next night, he continued his patrol as usual, and once again visited the room. John continued his nightly patrols, visiting the room each night. He noticed that the chair would become wet at a specific time every night, as if something deliberate was happening. John became convinced that the phenomenon was not a coincidence. One night, John decided to witness the moment. The chair became wet and stayed in the room all night. With his strong spiritual sensitivity, he felt an especially eerie presence that night, as the clock approached the time when the chair was supposed to become wet. The air in the room grew heavy. It felt as if someone invisible was watching him. At the expected time, John waited in the corner of the room, holding his breath. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the room, and he watched as the chair gradually became wet. There was no water dripping from the ceiling. The chair itself was becoming wet. John observed the scene with a mix of fear and astonishment, sensing that an invisible presence was indeed involved. The next morning, John detailed the previous night's events to his colleagues. He described the presence he felt and the inexplicable phenomenon he witnessed. This time, his colleagues took his story seriously and began to consider how to address the situation in the station. They realized that John's spiritual sensitivity could not be ignored. Following John's report, the station decided to seek expert advice. They invited a psychic named Ms. Misery to investigate the room. Upon arrival, Ms. Misery immediately sensed the abnormal presence in the room and began a thorough investigation. Ms. Misery entered the room and quietly touched the chair. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if sensing something. Then, she turned to John and the others, saying, "This room has a very strong spiritual energy. This chair indicates that a tragic event occurred here in the past." She added, "This spiritual presence seems to want to convey something." Ms. Misery suggested to John, "To understand what this spirit wants to communicate, we need to stay in this room all night." John followed her instructions and remained in the room that night. As the night deepened, the cold wind blew again, and the chair started to become wet. Ms. Misery quietly prayed, trying to receive the spiritual message. That night, Ms. Misery received a powerful message from the spirit. It was the spirit of a young woman who had been involved in a tragic incident in this room and had unresolved issues. John understood what the spirit wanted to convey and began to think about what he could do for her. Ms. Misery advised, "To help this spirit find peace, we need to uncover the truth of the incident and fulfill her wishes." John took Ms. Misery's advice and began to reinvestigate the past incident that occurred in the room. He found old records revealing that a young woman had committed suicide in that room decades ago. Her death remained unresolved. John believed that the spirit of this woman was connected to the incident. John contacted the victim's family and gathered detailed information. Although it was painful for the family to talk about the incident, they cooperated with John's sincerity. They spoke about the problems the woman faced during her life and the unresolved questions surrounding her death. John used this information to advance his reinvestigation. The reinvestigation revealed that the woman's suicide was likely a murder. With new evidence, John worked diligently to uncover the truth of the case. He collaborated with his colleagues to reanalyze the evidence from the time and eventually identified the true culprit. The new findings finally resolved the long-unsolved case. After the case was resolved, John called Ms. Misery again to perform a ritual for the spirit's repose. They informed the woman's spirit that the truth had been uncovered and justice had been served. Ms. Misery prayed, guiding the spirit to rest peacefully. That night, John visited the room once more, and the chair was no longer wet. The spirit had found peace and tranquility returned. This story was about the mysterious and terrifying experiences of John, a spiritually sensitive police officer. The mystery of the wet chair was deeply connected to a tragic incident that occurred in that room in the past. Thanks to the efforts of John and the psychic Ms. Misery, the truth of the incident was revealed, allowing the long-suffering spirit to find peace. The lesson from this story is that no matter how scientifically inexplicable a phenomenon may be, there is always a reason behind it. It is important to understand and respect past events and people's emotions. John's courageous pursuit of the truth offers valuable insights for all of us. I hope this story has conveyed some of these lessons to you. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Also, feel free to share any strange experiences you have had or any advice you have for my grandchildren, who are middle school students using handy editing software to create these videos, in the comments. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.